Hi and welcome back to Cheeky Crypto. My name is Nick and today guys we're going to be jumping down into the world of Bitcoin. We'll be taking a look at the 1 hour time frame, the 1 day time frame and the weekly time frame from a technical analysis standpoint. We'll be jumping into some data and some news around BTC and then taking a look at a few things that are going on in the space as well around exchanges and trades. So as we get into this video, if you find it useful and informative, smash that like button. I really do appreciate that. If you are new to the channel, then why not go ahead and subscribe, tap the bell, select all the notifications, and in doing so you will be kept up to date with absolutely everything that we do here at Cheeky Crypto. And if you haven't yet joined us in Discord, what are you waiting for? Check it out. The link for that is down in the description below. Let's jump right down into the video for today. So let's start things off with our 1 hour time frame technical analysis. And so here we have BTC paired up with USDT. Using the BitGet spot exchange on the 1 hour time frame. We saw a break to the downside yesterday. Obviously, we're nowhere near the actual target range of 28,093 to 28,342. And you know what's gone on here is a big quick move to the downside and then a quick recovery back to the upside. A double top scenario here at 29,326. Let me just check the wick on that. It is a high of 29,323. So basically a double top within the parameters of what you'd normally expect there. Let's go ahead and tidy this up because I do think our analysis has shifted and changed because of that quick recovery there. So what I want to do is I'm just going to remove some of these lines that we don't need to see right now, just to kind of keep it a little bit cleaner, so that we can see what's going on. I think we don't really need these yellow boxes either, so we'll go ahead and just remove those off there as well, and the sub count. So let's bring this back in. Okay, our target range down here is still something that is of interest to me. However, our minimum expectations have already been met because we came down quite nicely yesterday over to here, and this is lower than our A wave. In fact, it's also lower than this one over here as well. We have to consider that the potential here for this break to the upside that went up higher than our local high here, our local high over this side as well. And so what we've got to kind of consider is that this break to the upside could actually be a new structure in itself. Okay, so if we remove all of that scribbling off the chart, there is possible that the C wave truncated and ended here. Okay, now it's not a nice structure to be looking at, but it's something we have to kind of consider. We do see a 3-wave pattern as well internally. We have that marked up in here. Let me go ahead and grab that. We'll just measure the distance here. So we have that initial kind of pull to the downside, that bounce up. We went down here to the 882. If we take that as an entire movement in itself and we move it over to here, you can see that we come down to that 882. So it's a little bit shorter than you would normally expect it to, but it does look like it falls in line with kind of, that internal wave count of what you would expect, A, B, C. Okay, so I have to kind of consider this maybe a B wave movement back up, which is fine. We haven't breached that high, so we can still move on down. It's not the end of the world. We can still hit our target range down here, but this would have to be considered a B wave. If we breach higher than 29,425, then that will basically end that idea of this structured move to the downside here. This would basically no longer be a possibility within that structure. One of the other things that we can note is this little green area down here is a fair value gap, and what's gone on here is basically price has tapped into this a couple of times and lifted itself out. Now we are still in lower highs here, and lower lows, so it is still looking reasonably bearish, but things are interesting on this 1 hour time frame. Let's go ahead and bring this back in here for a second. So with a trend line, in fact, before I do that, let me just go ahead and tidy this out a little bit, right? If we just remove some of the noise, you can see if I grab a trend line here and start connecting the dots, you can kind of see, there's this idea that we still have further downside there. And also on this higher side here as well, right? We take that high up here, we connect it to those lows. Now, admittedly, if we did this yesterday, it would have looked more like this or like this, right? And so these trend lines, they are subjective. At the moment, I'm using these to indicate that we are in lower highs, okay, and lower lows, depending on where you want to kind of connect the dots, right? Essentially, we are at this kind of point in time where we aren't really getting any major movements on BTC. We're seeing a little bit of volatility to the downside, a little bit of volatility to the upside. For example, to the downside here, we saw a 1.7%, and to the upside here, we saw, if I actually snap it to the correct area, a 2.14%, right? So these aren't major movements. If you zoom out, you can kind of see that, not being anything too concerning. Essentially, I think considering our momentum indicator here is looking for corrections to the downside, I suspect that we are likely to see a bit of a correction downward here for BTC. Structures still remain true, but we'll see whether or not we breach that 29,425 as to whether or not we can see a bigger move to the upside. One of the possibilities that I need to consider here has to be that we are in some kind of A-wave move upwards. We come down to testing the previous area of support and then we rally on up. So the previous area of interest to me would be right inside this little zone of consolidation between 28,981 to 29,136, right? And so this would basically being just a little bit shorter or a little bit lower in the price chart than the equilibrium. At the moment, we're above the 50 EMA and 200 EMA, but the 50 EMA is below the 200 EMA on the hourly chart at the moment. So that's nothing too alarming or anything too concerning there. Essentially, we've breached above the 200 EMA. I don't think it's going to last all that long, but we'll see how that kind of goes. So there's a couple of possibilities. One, we still see the possibility of a move to the downside. If we can hold up well, then we might be able to see this as a break upwards. And again, this would actually be a more interesting position for Bitcoin, in my opinion, because we'll be able to take a look at this over a larger time frame and look at them like this, right? And so we haven't actually even started, or maybe only just starting that B-wave structure. So there's a few things to kind of consider within our patterns here for BTC, but for now, I think with momentum shifting back down, it's going to be interesting to see this kind of correct down and how price reacts to our 1 hour chart equilibrium in terms of our structure. Now we are in a bullish structure at the moment, although that has yet to be confirmed. We have had no break of structure to confirm that move yet. Okay, so it'll be interesting to see what happens next in terms of the overarching structure on the hourly chart. Let's move on over though. We'll go ahead and jump on into the daily time frame. If I push the right button, there we go. So on the daily time frame, what do we see? Well, we're coming up against resistance here again on that 50 EMA. Momentum on our daily time frame is not looking as good as it probably needs to be. Okay, so we can see here we've basically been stuck right in this little ranging market since when? The 24th of July, right? It's not exactly been overly impressive. We've seen a few wicks up higher than the 50 EMA. We even closed one position above that 50 EMA before rallying up slightly higher and then coming all the way back down below it. Essentially, this is a major area of selling pressure. We're finding a lot of selling pressure right up in this range here on our daily time frame. And I don't think this is really going to hold out either. We can already see that momentum isn't in a strong position on those smaller time frames like the 1 hour and the 4 hour time frames. On the daily, we can see some growth potential here, but the way that this momentum is moving, or this stochastic RSI is moving to the upside, it's making it look like we are seeing a lack of demand, a lack of volume in the price. This is also something that we can see when we actually take a look at the volume aspects of the chart, because we can see here that we're up against this resistance right up here on the 50 EMA. And whilst we're on that resistance, what are we seeing? Well, we're seeing a decrease in volume. Okay, this is basically showing us a less of an appetite to try to push on through it. The same is also true for selling pressure, right? Every time we see some selling pressure here as well, it's also not holding up reasonably well either. There's a little bit of increase in selling pressure right in the middle there, but for the most part, volumes are just on the decrease. There's very much a lack of interest in BTC. And this is also very visible when we take a look at search volumes and views on YouTube videos all the way through to Twitter and things like that, right? There's a lack of interest generally. We can also see that there's nothing really being indicated to us on the divergence indicator on this time frame either. So, I think essentially here what we're looking for is another rejection point on BTC on the short term for the daily chart. I think we're going to be testing probably some of these lower ranges again, just keeping another kind of sideways trade move going here. The big concern I would have on the daily time frame is how fast this momentum indicator potentially goes up and goes to overbought. If it goes to overbought and all we're doing is basically being stuck inside this range here, then I think we're going to have a big catalyst for a big move to the downside, and that's going to be a big problem for BTC holders. Let's go ahead and move on over into our weekly time frame. So on our weekly time frame, we can see that, we've got this interesting overlapping structured move to the upside. Again, it's not a structure that looks impulsive. It is basically a corrective pattern heading its way up. We kind of have hit into the upper area of resistance. Now, when you take a look at the weekly time frame, we did actually switch exchange here, guys. So we went from Bitcoin USDT BitGet to Bitcoin USD Bitstamp. Okay, so this weekly chart is Bitstamp because we have more data on Bitstamp from the weekly standpoint. It's more useful. So you can see up here, there's this interesting range. If I pull it all the way across, you can kind of see that that's where we're consolidating, right? This particular range comes in at the 28,600 to 32,289. And this is basically a previous area of demand, right? And so what do we mean by this? Well, this previous area of demand is basically where price went into, and there was so much buying pressure, price basically reversed from this range, right? Came back down to this area, so much demand in this area, price reversed. Okay, it came back down, okay, but it didn't reverse on that third attempt. Instead, it broke all the way through it. Now, usually this area of demand turns into an area of supply. So you can see here, it became an area of supply and then married on down. We're back up in this area. The last time we were here, it became an area of supply. And right now, it's also becoming an area of supply, right? Now, the differences between where we were and where we are now is the amount of time that was spent in these ranges. As a demand range, it was spending maybe just, a few hours in here and then reversed on out. Now, as a potential supply range, it's actually spending a lot longer, days, in fact, inside this range. And that's not necessarily what you want to see either. I mean, it's what you want to see maybe if you want to be bullish on the market, but not so much if you want to be bearish on the market, thinking about moves to the downside. Now, what you have here, and the reason and the rationale behind why a demand area turns into a supply area is quite simple. Essentially here, this was a first area of buying pressure. This was a second area. So basically twice it's come into this range, and you were able to buy this range and it rallied on up. Now, the third time it comes down here and you think, great, I can buy it because it's been support before, it's going to hold support now, and people got trapped in their positions here, okay, and then price comes down, they're in losses. Now, if they didn't sell all of this down here and they just held, hoping that price would go back, or price is back to where it was, where they bought, and they can sell and get out at cost neutral. So psychologically, what you tend to find is previous areas of support turn into resistance, or demand turn into supply, because people can get out of their positions that they were trapped into for such a significant period of time if they didn't already succumb to selling pressure. Now, the way that this is consolidating in this range, it's basically telling us there's not that much selling pressure here, but that also backs up the idea that there's just not that much interest in BTC. Okay, so on our weekly time frame, that's key area for us. The other area that I'm looking for, and I'm looking at this area as a potential for basically a bigger reversal in the market if we were to rally on up, comes in at the 34,324 to 33,717. This particular area is also another area of support that was broken and could be our resistance. This also happens to fall in line with the CME gap, and the CME gap also potentially getting filled out would then see us with reversal as well. So I think there's a few things here higher in the price chart that we might be able to rally towards, and that would be very interesting. Now, also to note, let me find my parallel channels here, and this isn't going to be perfect. I'm just going to illustrate this on here. When we have these lower highs and lower lows, they do have a tendency to wanting to break on upwards, right? We can see this time and time again, over and over again. In fact, we can see these at multiple different levels, right? And so what happens here is when you are in higher highs and in higher lows, you tend to break on down, okay, as you can kind of see in our bear market over here, for example, okay, and when you're in lower lows and lower highs, you have a tendency to wanting to break on upwards. And so we find ourselves in some interesting areas right now where we are in lower lows and lower highs, and there is this idea that we will potentially break on upwards, right? And I'm looking at that CME gap as that area of interest. We've seen this time and time again so far. It's not a guarantee, but it's something that we can observe inside the price chart. Okay, this is not to say that the market is overall bullish or overall bearish, because I do think this is a one hell of a big trap where we're actually in higher highs and higher lows, and I do expect us to actually see a very significant break to the downside over the kind of coming weeks and months, right? I suspect that what we're going to do is we're going to tap into this higher range here, which is going to be a big bear trap, a big bull trap, and then I think we're going to see, not necessarily lower lows, but a $20,000 BTC. So on our weekly time frame, that's kind of where I think things are heading. It's looking interesting, but it's going to take some time to play out, right? We're not where we need to be just yet for that one. I do think it's going to take some time before we do actually go ahead and see such a move play out. But I'm expecting a move at least supported on the daily time frame and weekly time frame towards that $34,000-$35,000 CME gap. Let's move on over into some data then for BTC. So for those who do not know, we have our own membership website, membership.𝗕𝗘𝗪𝗏𝗀𝗋𝗚. Here you can have access to various different benefits, right? We have so much to offer. I can't even go through it all on this video, but essentially in some of these packs that we have available to us, you can add something called data pack or data perk, and one of these perks or packages here, they're basically what we call the mega pack. This one actually contains access to the data already. Any of these can have the bolt-on, basically just add the data to whatever one you want. So if you only want the base level, then of course you can add the data at the checkout process as well. If you want trader alerts and things like that, you can get the trader alerts for them plus the data, whatever you need. Essentially there's a 7-day free trial across all of them, so there's risk-free trials that you can be done there. And the reason I bring this up, guys, is obviously there's a data zone that once you remember you can get access to, and there's Bitcoin data right in here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to load up the Bitcoin data. This is the area where you'd see like an overview of Bitcoin, you'd see the inflows, the outflows of BTC, you'd see the liquidations, you see the wallet counts, are whale selling, for example, and all that kind of stuff. I'm not going to focus in on the whale counts today. I'm going to focus in on liquidations, because I want to see, what is going on with liquidations for BTC, right? So $17.8 million of liquidations on BTC. OKX was the exchange with the most amount of liquidations for Bitcoin at $6.53 million. We can see that 61.97% of long positions were liquidated and 38.03% of short positions were liquidated. Okay, so we already know that we see significant amount of volatility in the price action. We saw that on the hourly chart, that quick move to the downside, that larger move from reversal to the upside, right? And we can see that OKX 6.5 million, Binance was 5.2 million, Bybit of 2.5 million, Huobi at 2.1 million, right? And outside of that, these CoinEx, BitMEX, Bitfinex, and Deribit, they're actually less than $1 million in liquidations. So OKX was a total of 36.5% of liquidations, Binance at a total of 29%, Bybit 14%, and then Huobi at 12% of liquidations, right? So is there anything unusual about this data? This data is really important that we look at this, because this is how we're able to spot whether there are exchanges with potential issues. And we'll talk more about exchanges in a moment, but this is basically a way to see and flag out anyone who's doing anything unusual. If you keep an eye on these things every single day, it's really obvious when something abnormal happens, something unusual happens, right? We saw this with FTX because we were observing this every single day. We got wind that FTX were doing unusual activity around their liquidations up to 1 week before the event of complete collapse occurred. This allowed us and our community to take advantage of that situation. We were able to see what they were doing, and we were able to warn people and say, you might not want to be on FTX. There's a reason that all these liquidations are happening. They probably need the funds, and therefore probably not a good idea to be on FTX. You might want to remove your funds. And as such, we were able to save people millions of dollars from exposure to FTX way ahead of time, right? And not only that, also you can take a look at the technical analysis and say maybe you should short something like FTT at the same time, right? So this particular chart, although is quite simplistic, it has a really, really powerful use case because it allows you to see things that are unusual, but you do have to keep an eye on it every single day. And so liquidation-wise, nothing unusual at the moment, okay? We have spoken to OKX about why they seem to be top of the list as well, but we won't talk about that right at this particular second. Let's move on over, though, into some news-based stuff that we've seen going on, right? And so analyst warns that Bitcoin could face a similar bearish fate as Litecoin in the upcoming halving report. Now, a lot of people kind of really jump on that idea that the halving is going to be a catalyst for a bull run. And I really struggle to understand the logical rationale behind that now. Okay, it used to be a really big point. It used to make a lot of logical sense that halving the amount of Bitcoin that can be mined, is very, very significant. However, I think it has less and less impact over time. We have to consider, and I'll go back to our data for this because it's another reason that we have the overview here. In this overview for Bitcoin, we can see the issuance, right? The inflation rate. Okay, how much Bitcoin is actually being produced, new Bitcoin mined in a single day, right? And it's 1,025 at the moment. So that would be halved, right? So it's hovering around the 900 to 1,000 Bitcoin a day. That will be halved. Is that meaningful? Yes, it's quite meaningful, but is it really going to be that impactful? Probably not, because there's 19,451,018 BTC out in circulating supply. That number is more important than the issuance number. Okay, so the circulating supply is already very vast. Now, if you go back to in the very early days of Bitcoin, where the circulating supply was very minimal, then halving the amount of new supply is actually quite impactful. But now the circulating supply is actually very, very large in comparison to the issuance. The impact of a Bitcoin halving event is minimal, okay, and it's going to become even more so over time. So do I think it's going to suffer the same kind of fate? Not necessarily, but if you take a look at the charts and you take a look at the history of the Bitcoin halving events, price usually gets rejected. It usually goes down on Bitcoin halving and then it rallies after. Okay, so usually Bitcoin will have a halving event. It's rallied beforehand. There's a nice healthy correction after the Bitcoin halving event happens, as in maybe sell the news, however you want to articulate it. But normally there's a good healthy correction, 20, 30%, something to that effect. And then from there, you see a rally to the upside, okay? And normally is way after the Bitcoin halving event. So to kind of say, it could face a similar fate to Litecoin, I think it's an inevitability. It's happened in the past, it will happen again. And Bitcoin's halving event really has very minimal impact now on that circulating supply. It's not going to have a dramatic effect on the supply and demand metrics of BTC. And so we have to kind of consider, it probably will have a very similar impact than what Litecoin's halving event had. These things are just buzzwords and things that are really easy to kind of communicate across to you or to just, people and the communities that, Bitcoin halving event is a catalyst for a bull run, right? And sure, it was way back in 2011 or 2016, right? It sure looks like it was a catalyst, right? But actually the bull run starts way before the Bitcoin halving event. And you can see this within the price action as well. The impact of the Bitcoin halving event is quite minimal now, and I think it's going to get even more or even less important as time gets by. But it's some nice headline that people can sell you and tell you these wonderful stories about how the Bitcoin halving event is going to be the golden opportunity within crypto, right? But I just think it's absolutely crazy to kind of think about it like that, and I think you have to have a more logical approach to it. And I smell just bullshit when it comes to a lot of this stuff. So we take a look at the data and we understand how the impact of these events on the data, and it doesn't look very good to me. But we'll see how that kind of progresses. I imagine history will repeat itself when it comes to the Bitcoin halving event, and we'll see a massive sell-off. We also saw PayPal launch their USD stablecoin. So a boon for Ethereum, but not decentralization, says the community. And I agree. I think this is basically PayPal kind of rushing something out there to market because they need to kind of be that kind of front running. Now, I would say I've had some very negative experiences with PayPal over the years. I think many business owners have. PayPal are not as crypto friendly as they might want to be perceived. They recently shut down our PayPal account, our business PayPal account, because we were a crypto business, right? High risk, according to those guys who are launching, a stable coin and also are involved in crypto. It seems that they want to have the perception of decentralization and a perception of the future without actually supporting businesses within that industry. Instead, what they want to do is they want to basically control it. They want centralization within it. And so centralization, I think this is good for PayPal. I don't think it's good for people. And I do not think that anyone in their right mind should be using PayPal for for crypto. I think that is just insanity. Now, it will help, of course, bring in some non-crypto folk into the space, and hopefully they'll learn very quickly that PayPal is not the place to be when it comes to, well, pretty much anything, because I do not think they're a good company to be operating or dealing business with. So I think ultimately we've seen a lot of things with PayPal over the years, a lot of really negative things from a business side. From a user point of view, it might seem really easy and a really nice, easy platform to kind of utilize. But ultimately, from a business point of view, businesses are getting screwed over by PayPal left, right, and center. And so I think it's really bad to kind of have retail investors looking at PayPal as a solution for crypto. I think crypto needs to go beyond some of these centralized companies. So yeah, it's there. It is what it is. I wouldn't be using it. I would not recommend anybody be using it. And I would recommend everybody stays well clear from PayPal. But, you know, it will bring some new adoption into crypto. I just hope it doesn't stay at PayPal, because I think that would be rather unfortunate for those individuals. Let's move on, though, because we do need to kind of talk a little bit around exchanges and 𝗕𝗓𝗪 specifically, right? So as we were talking about those liquidations, we did see that 𝗕𝗓𝗪's stablecoin reserves are down 30% amid reports of executive arrest. Now, I do not have more information outside of what's already in the news with this, but obviously we have to kind of consider that things are not looking overly bright. Now, is a lot of this just FUD and just noise? Is this legitimate? Is this just kind of trying to create waves in the space? Are they insolvent? Are they not insolvent? It's quite an interesting one to kind of keep an eye on. And of course, at the same time, there's also rumors around Justin Sun saying that the 𝗕𝗓𝗪 exchange is solvent while simultaneously also siphoning off funds. Again, I have no evidence to back that up, but something that Chris was talking about in our AMA yesterday with our members was how Justin Sun was very much talking about how it's solvent, there's no problems at 𝗕𝗓𝗪, and at the same time there are transactions withdrawing millions from the exchange. So ultimately it's going to be very, very interesting to kind of see how this breaks down, if it does break down at all. You can see the token breakdown here, Bitcoin being 35%, TRX being 26%, and then obviously you have all these other little coins as well. So I think it's going to be interesting to kind of see how this kind of plays out overall, but it's an exchange that I've not used. It's an exchange I've never used, and it's an exchange I will probably never use. And I say probably because you never know what the future holds, but I don't think it's one that's high on my list to be utilizing. There's no strange liquidations from a Bitcoin standpoint. We've looked at that. There's nothing unusual going on there. It's a little bit higher than you would normally expect 𝗕𝗓𝗪 to be, but that's kind of understandable considering some of the volatility that we're seeing with the exchange. Ultimately, BitGet is my go-to platform. You guys know this by now. I use BitGet for 100% of my leverage positions and 90 to 95% of my spot positions. Like I say, pretty much most of the videos these days, it's always great to have access to as many different exchanges as you possibly can. I use BitGet as my go-to platform, but there are other exchanges that I use as my backup, such as KuCoin, Gate.io. We have Bitfinex, Bitrue, we have Coinbase and Binance, right? A list kind of goes on and on. Now, there's an affiliate link in the description below. If you haven't yet signed up for an account with BitGet, I strongly suggest that you do. It's always great to have access to as many of these exchanges as you possibly can, because you just do not know which ones are going to be up and running when you need them the most. Personally, I find that BitGet's a really self-intuitive platform, easy to use, and has quite quickly become my go-to platform. If you sign up to BitGet using the affiliate link in the description below, not only will you be eligible for up to $8,000 in rewards for depositing and trading on the platform, I think you'll also find that it's actually probably going to be your go-to platform as well. It's a growing platform that is seeing adoption at a true global level, and I do think this is going to be one of the biggest exchanges in the coming years. So if you haven't already, why not check it out? What have you got to lose? Sign up link is in the description down below. And in terms of trades, we've been doing a few trades recently, but nothing terribly too much. We've seen some interesting volatility recently in the market, and I think we will be doing some more trades down in our Discord server. Of course, I will be using BitGet as my kind of go-to platform for those trades, so well worth checking out BitGet. And if you haven't yet become a member, guys, you should definitely go ahead and check that out. We do a lot of stuff for our traders down there in terms of analysis on request, all the way through to taking that analysis and actually creating trade ideas based upon it. And again, 7-day free trial, guys. So what have you got to lose? Check it out. Link is in the description below. I'm going to leave this video right there, guys. I've kind of rambled on for quite some time here. So if you have found this useful and informative, smash that like button. I do appreciate that. If you are new to the channel, then why not go ahead and subscribe, tap the bell, select all the notifications, and in doing so, you will be kept up to date with absolutely everything that we do here at Cheeky Crypto. With all that said, done and out of the way, guys, I hope everyone has a fantastic day, and I'll catch you all in the next one.